Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Drunk Bible Study, the bonus edition, or whatever. I don't know. I'm going to call it that from now on.
Okay.
This was an interesting few chapters that we read back there. A lot happened, and David acquired a new lady, and that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Two new ladies.
Couple new ladies.
You're right. I mean, one of them, was the other one even spoken? Like, did we get a name for her?
Did she have any lines? We got a line. We got a name.
No lines.
Not a line.
Yeah.
She had no lines, yeah.
She was a named
Abigail,
extra.
Yeah, I mean, even the little story of Abigail was pretty sparse, but
I thought her story was cool.
Yeah, it was a cool, interesting story, and so during it, basically, Abigail comes and, I mean, you just listened to the episode probably, dear listener out there, but Abigail comes and she is wife to Nabal, who has a ton of, money and servants and oxen and all this stuff. And yeah, she kind of like throws him under the bus to David immediately upon meeting David and says like, he's a fool, essentially. Like, he is his namesake here,
Right.
which is interesting. Yeah. So I was looking up because after this happens, after she meets with David, Nabal dies. And there is this idea in the Bible that maybe she poisoned him. Maybe she poisoned Nabal.
By idea in the Bible, you mean there's an idea floating out there?
Well,
an interpretation of the Bible that maybe she poisoned him?
Well, we thought that immediately. We were like, because it said something like he turned to stone and then like 10 days later he was dead. And we were like, wait a minute, is this ricin or is this like rat poison? Like, what happened here?
Well, it's the fact that she told David basically like, oh, he's going to be out of the picture. Don't worry about it. And then he did.
Exactly.
That's what to me made me think that she had a hand in it.
Yeah. Well, and when you look this up on the internet, there's nothing obviously definitive that says, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, she killed him. But if you go to this very interesting website called SandraWilliams.org, she has a ton of different papers on such subjects. And this one is about these three characters, and it's like a very long dissertation kind of talking about it. But yeah, it's very interesting because she speaks about the fact that David is seen kind of in the world as like this man that like everything goes right for, he gets out of all these binds and like God loves him and gives him whatever. And he's committed maybe sort of treasonous acts against God, but like has only gotten a slap on the hand, whereas someone like Saul totally, God gets super angry at Saul.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does say in this one, they're like, this is not a telling of the story that most people would go for or would like believe is true, but they do think that Abigail might have decided, okay, we need to get Nabal out of the picture. We see how important David is and how important he's going to be in the grand scheme of things. And so she kind of plots and decides, I'm going to go be with David. And yeah, she kills him. She kills him with poison and then goes off. And yeah, it's interesting because it talks about one side of the Bible, or one side of like people reading this think that like Abigail is virtuous and really, loves David. And so she's like doing right by God because David is God's chosen one in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
But then this woman thinks, oh no, she's going against her husband, and that's a really bad thing. And so Abigail's actually more of like an anti-hero figure in the Bible.
That's interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird though that this person has to then like put a bunch of moralism onto it.
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's what most of these types of things do.
Well, sure, but I'm just
on the internet.
But I'm just thinking like you could also look at it another way and go, okay, yeah, it wasn't about her being so in love with David. It was about her making a political move for power, which is also just like what David does.
Yes.
So like they are maybe a well-matched couple in that way, that they're both like very good at maneuvering for political power.
Yeah, and kind of manipulating and stuff. And yeah, it even says like that David must find it sexy that she's like kind of conniving and wants to go off and
he's super into it. Yeah,
do this thing like against her husband who's the fool.
Right.
And yeah, it is pretty funny. It's like, oh, she makes a detailed and powerful argument mixed with good salesmanship. I'm like, wow, okay.
I mean, she's not wrong. Like,
no, that's
she's not
true.
Wrong.
But it essentially says that, yeah, like 2 weeks after these two people meet, they get married, which is, I didn't realize the timeline was that quick. But yeah, I guess that's how quickly it happened. And
like, if it's this time enough for her to get home, poison Nabal, have him die 10 days later, gather up her suitcase, and then pop on over to David's.
And if you remember, she brought like, you know, all those skeins of wine and then all of the loaves of bread.
She only brought 2 bottles of wine. We were still disappointed about that.
But 200 loaves of bread, like it said that. It was like, why did she just have these loaves lying around? And I went, that essentially, that she like had premeditated this whole thing. She heard of David coming in. She was like, make all these loaves of bread, servants, and we're going to take it down to David and we're going to get him to marry me.
Yeah, maybe.
I guess it would make sense if I'm thinking from her perspective, the alternative here is probably either at the very best, okay, if you know that like, okay, all right, I'm just thinking about what she may think her alternatives are to like stay with Nabal and hope that Nabal is somehow able to defeat David or stave off this attack. Then you're still married to Nabal, who, as apparently the Bible says, was a terrible dude that no one liked. Yeah. So that's like not a good scenario for her. Other option is stay with Nabal. Nabal gets killed by David and then be a widow of someone who's defeated by David, and that probably sucks. Or what's most likely is that David would probably come along and kill the entire family, including her and the servants, like just considering the way things were done in the Bible.
Well, that was his plan. That was literally his plan.
Right. Yeah. Just everybody. So I think it makes sense to maybe see her as maybe a little bit less like conniving for power, more of like, my only option is to jump ship.
Sandra Williams thinks that she should have stood by her man, the original man.
Well, and Sandra Williams would have ended up dead.
I'm like, Sandra, Abigail was just like playing her cards right here, okay?
Yeah. So I'm sure she weighed up all her options to just realize like, this is the best one.
Yeah.
Totally.
Gotta do it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Get bacon, servants.
Yeah. No, I love it. All right. Wow. So that's what I got.
Well, I'm going to talk about man children and those who pisseth against the wall.
Did you actually
I remember.
Did you actually find anything about that?
Oh.
Okay, good.
Jace.
Oh, I'm excited.
Oh, wow.
Jace. So, okay. I'm going to talk about this kind of in 2 acts, as it were. First act, I'm going to talk about this translation of pisseth against the wall that's in the King James Version. You know, it literally is from the Hebrew word to make water, which was what they used as the word for pissing. Okay. And against the wall, to make water against the wall. So it is like literally what you get on the tin. They're referring to people who piss against the wall.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, there's been a couple different interpretations of what that might mean. Some people say that, like, yeah, this is a very contemptuous phrase because of the idea that, like, at this time culturally, the only people who do piss against the wall are either dogs or like low-class citizens or slaves or literally little boys. You know, like apparently it's considered much more decent to actually squat because you're covered, like your robe is covering you, you know, instead of just like whipping your junk out.
So you got to cover your feet instead.
You got to cover your feet.
Okay.
Even when you're peeing? What? That's, I don't know.
Yeah,
okay.
that was considered just more decent, you know, like less vulgar to do.
Right.
And so there is some discussion around, does this mean literal little boys? Like he's saying, I'm going to kill every single last one of them, even to the children.
Whoa.
Or does it just mean that it's just a slur, you know, that he's just
he's insulting their masculinity,
he's insulting their masculinity, calling them man children.
You can do, yeah. Got it.
And it is ironic that now the most insulting thing that you could do to insult someone's masculinity is, I mean, maybe not the most insulting thing, but is to imply that a man pees sitting down, that it's kind of flip-flopped.
Oh, yeah, that is a weird irony.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
You know, that like
point.
in our culture, the more masculine way of peeing is standing up and against a wall. What's more?
Outside in front of everyone. No.
Okay. So that was as far as like the content of like this translation. Weird. Okay. What I do love about doing the research for the bonus episodes is the wackadoodle sites that you come across.
Yeah, like I just came across. Yes.
It's this whole other level. It's this whole other level of just interesting stuff that you find. So this site that I found this particular article on was from a site called for what saith the scriptures.org.
Yes.
That's really good. Can we rename our podcast to that?
For what saith the scriptures.org.
Well, we'll be
The
.com.
podcast?
We'll .podcast, yeah.
Oh, gosh. And it's also, as you can imagine, not a well-designed site. Looks like it came out of the 90s,
Yeah.
even though this particular blog post that I was reading from was from 2017.
Oh, wow.
Now, this particular article, it spends a little bit of time on the translation. They're like, yeah, maybe it means this, maybe it means that. The main concern of this article that I was reading was whether or not it's even okay to say the word piss in the Bible.
What?
Because of the fact that it's like, what? Isn't that vulgar? And so it goes into this long etymological, what do I want to call
Diatribe?
it? Like, yes, diatribe of just like, well, piss originally came from this word and from this Old English word, which came from the Latin word and the French word. And so therefore it wasn't vulgar back in this day when it was being. So anyway, now
So weird.
that all kind of gets summed up in the conclusion. Now, the conclusion to this article, I'm going to read to you because it's kind of like giving directions to someone who's going to be preaching on this passage and how to handle
Okay.
it. So
Okay.
these are the instructions. Okay. Before your audience, read the pisseth against the wall verses as they are. Okay, that's in bold. Read it as they are. It is no different than the authorized version's ass verses that refer to a donkey. Then be very careful to clarify and say, let me stop a few moments to explain this special phrase. Urinate was a new word at the time of the authorized version's production, which was in 1611. It had not come into common English usage yet. Piss was the older and more familiar term. It was purer then than it is now. It was not vulgar then as it is today. Now, to the against the wall part. At the time of this Bible verse, in the East, it was common for an adult man to sit down and urinate, thus giving him privacy. Now, this is in brackets. Notice how you switch the term here from piss to urinate as you are no longer directly quoting the authorized
Oh,
version.
this is very... You really
Close-
got to
close
practice
brackets.
this.
Yeah,
A boy
geez.
was less indecent, exposing himself while urinating. The term "he that pisseth against the wall" refers strictly to a boy rather
Really?
than an adult man. Okay, this was literally in quotes of like, this is what this person wants you to say
Right.
to
Oh,
your
okay.
audience
Oh,
slash
I see.
congregation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow, goodness.
And then this conclusion goes on for another 3 paragraphs, basically explaining how like you can't criticize the Bible. There is no wrong translation. Like there is no disrespectful interpretation. And like to skip over this is to let the Bible haters and the Bible critics see it as an occasion to misunderstand the Bible.
You know what I love is that this person has now inadvertently defended us and our podcast.
There you go.
Right? There is
Thanks.
no, shameful interpretation of the Bible or whatever.
Well, we're not even, are we even like interpreting it? And we're just trying to interpret it. We're trying to like figure something out that's happening.
Well,
Yeah,
he's
I
just
guess.
That's a
saying-
meta interpretation
Yeah.
of an interpretation
That's true.
going on here.
All right. Yeah.
Anyway, I just love the fact that like I went looking for piss and I found this whole
found
gold
it.
mine.
You found
You
it.
found a gold.
You found a
mine.
gold mine indeed.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Wow, there it is.
Wow.
it is.
Okay, so to finish us out here, I was trying to look up the thing about Michal being given to someone else. I'm like, wait, can
Yeah.
Saul do that? Are there take-backsies with brides being given
With
away?
wivesies?
Take-backsies with wivesies? What's the deal? So in looking this up, I didn't find anything specific about like whether that was a normal practice or that was something that you could do. And it seems to indicate that it's not. Like that's not a thing you could
Okay.
do. However, some things they point out is the fact that basically it's that, so David, got married to Michal. She loved him and they got married, right? And then remember when David was running away and she hid the teraphim in the bed? She did the Ferris Bueller's Day Off thing, had the dummy in the
Totally.
bed. And then
Yeah.
when they came and he ran away and she lied for him and then they got pissed off, that it pointed out there's no mention of David ever trying to contact her again after that. He's just like, peace,
Jeez.
I'm out.
Peace out, lady.
And
Oh.
so then Saul giving her away to someone else is sort of this like, well, he's gone, right? He's gone. We've got to marry you off to someone else. Like you're free again. So I'm going to marry you to this other dude. Now, what's interesting is that this story of her getting married off to the other dude is not done yet. So I don't want to spoil anything, but just like keep your ears peeled. This is going to come back later.
Wow.
But then the other thing they pointed out is, well, I guess just that thing of like, well, so what does this mean about David's relationship with her? And it kind of, to go back to what we were talking about with Abigail, reminds me a little bit of that, like, well, is this all just political maneuvering for David then? And
Definitely.
that for him, it wasn't so much about love for her, even though it might have been her for him.
We know where his heart.
Yeah,
Well,
he's clearly in love with Jonathan.
That's true. But yeah, anyway, just that he kind of is like, okay, whatever, and then leaves. It does raise some interesting questions, though, about her legal ability to get married to someone else, because as we've talked about before, like there's some kind of weird laws there where technically she couldn't marry someone else without a divorce or her husband dying or something. But again, Saul's the king, so maybe he can just sort of wave his hand and make that go away. But this question of the legality of her marriage is also going to come back up again when this story picks back up. So anyway, I don't want to give away too much, but we're going to deal more with her and her marriages and how David's related to all of it a little bit later.
That's exciting.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it. All right. Well, we will see you all next week with the next episode of Drunk Bible Study. Until then, have a great week.